What's up, everybody? This is Cool Dude. Yes, I'm still alive. I'm just as surprised as you are about that. But enough about the stability of my channel. Let's talk about the reason why we're here today, and that is Cuphead difficulty ranking. So, quite a while ago, feels like ages ago anyway, I made a video where I ranked the Cuphead bosses on difficulty, and that was before the DLC came out. And it was pretty well responded to. I imagine because it was Cuphead, and also because tier lists were pretty hot at that point. Regardless, it was pretty hot, and now it really ages like milk. It did not age very great. I tried to do the difficulty ranking on both regular and expert, and that was a mistake on my part, and I don't like that. In hindsight, I really should have done it in two separate videos, both one on regular and one on expert. So that's exactly what we're doing today, and this first video here is going to be on ranking the difficulty on regular mode, and then another video, which will come out later, will do it on expert. We'll rank the difficulty on expert mode. So that's what this video is, ranking them on regular. And also, this is the legacy version of the game, the complete version with all the charms, all the different charms you can get, all the different supers you have with Miss Chalice, and all the DLC bosses. So I'll be doing the DLC bosses as well. I'm also not going to be including, though, the Secret Angel and Devil fight that you can do in the DLC, because you can't really get a rank on that. And there's no expert mode for that either. And also, I'm not going to be doing any of the King's Tournament things that you can do in the DLC. Also, one last thing, this is my own personal opinion, alright? I get it, there's going to be some disagreements. That's the good thing about, stuff and sharing your opinions, that everyone's is different, we can all learn from each other's, and we can all, have different experiences with stuff, and we can share them. Let's not be douches about it, okay? If you disagree with me, fine. If you agree with me, fine. Feel free to share it in the comments, but please be respectful about it, alright? And if you're not going to be respectful about it, I would prefer if you don't comment. But if you comment, thanks anyway, because you're helping the algorithm. With that being said, let's go on with the video. Let's discuss the ranking. So instead of placing them individually one by one like I usually do and having you here all day, I'm going to speed things up a little bit and just kind of do a bullet point summary on why I have each of them here in the rankings that they have. The tiers themselves should be pretty self-explanatory. We'll start off with the bottom here, easy breezy. These are the bosses that shouldn't give you too much trouble. They're pretty simplistic, really the easiest fights in the game. We have Sally's stage play from aisle 3. She's not that difficult. Previously, the second phase was pretty problematic, where she has, like the little wind-up toys and the babies throwing milk, but now in the Legacy Edition especially, there's a lot of things you can do to counteract that, and it just makes it really, really easy, and then the rest of the fight is just as easy as it was on the original version of the game. So, that's why she's here. Werner Vermin also should go without saying. Most of these bosses in this bottom tier should be pretty self-explanatory if you've played the game already. Werner Vermin, pretty simple fight. The only phase that's kind of problematic for me is the second phase with all the bottle caps, but even then, it's not as bad on regular as it is on expert, and it goes by pretty quick all the same. So that's why Werner Vermin's here. Wally Warbles, easiest plane fight in the game. Really nothing too bad. You can hug the wall in the first phase. Second phase is just a bullet hell, which, depending on how you do bullet hells, could be hard, could be easy, but it's not too bad. His son phase, aside from the spinning eggs that can be kind of a little problematic, it's not too bad either. And the final phase also isn't too difficult, although there is a lot to dodge. I was debating putting him in semi-easy, but nah, I think he's easy. Then we have Cagney Carnation, pretty self-explanatory there. One of the beginning bosses, nothing too crazy. The only thing that might be tricky on the first playthrough, and that's also, I guess I should say, I'm doing regular mode. Half of the way I'm ranking these bosses on regular is just going on the assumption that it's your first playthrough of the game, because on your first playthrough you have to play it on regular mode, and at least if you want to beat the game. If you could play it on simple, but you can't get to the final boss, but you already know that. Most of you already know that. So I'm doing this based on the first playthrough, or a game or a gamer's first go through of the game. So that's how I'm doing regular. So anyway, Cagney Carnation, nothing too bad. That one attack with the machine gun might trip some people up, but he doesn't do it as often as he does on the expert mode, so it's not too bad. So that's why he's here. Root Pack, tutorial boss. What can I say that hasn't been said already about him? They're pretty easy. And Goopy Legrande, the easiest one in the game. Still on expert and still on regular. He's pretty simplistic. Then we have semi-easy, which is a little bit harder than the easy bosses. There might have one or two sections here and there that might be a little problematic, more problematic than the easy bosses, but still nothing too bad. Ribby and Croaks are here just because of the final phase. On your first playthrough, that slot machine will probably get you tripped up quite a bit. The random attacks that they do with the tiger, I think the snakes, and the devil or bisons or whatever they are, that could trip some people up there and, probably die a few times to that. But other than that, nothing too bad. Baroness von Bonbon, I kind of have to put her here just because of the RNG involved and the minions she spawns that could, be a little troublesome. And the final phase can be a bit hectic if you don't know what you're doing. But other than that, fairly easy. Next we have Jimmy the Great. Nothing too crazy here. I think definitely the space can be a bit of an issue. And the RNG involved in the first phase can give you a little bit of a hit, which can impact your overall performance in the rest of the fight, but nothing too bad here. Beppy the Clown, kind of had to put him up here just because the final phase with the penguins throwing the baseballs at you and jumping on the platforms, that can be a little bit tricky for people. And the balloon phase, I still think, is a little bit tricky to do, especially on your first playthrough. Trying to avoid them, trying to dodge them, trying to parry the pink ones. But other than that, Beppy's pretty good. Pretty alright to do. Briny Beard, I had to put him on semi-easy just because of the hecticness of the phases leading up to the boat, or the boat turns into the big whale. But Briny Beard's pretty easy, especially considering he's on Isle 3. He's pretty easy at that point of the game on your first playthrough. Phantom Express, I've seen a lot of people putting him on hard. Even like today, he's considered one of the harder ones, but Phantom Express really isn't that bad. Once you get used to the gimmick of the parrying thing, which is part of the reason why he's so high up, or on semi-easy anyway, he's not too bad. Or it's not too bad, I guess I should say. There are multiple ghosts in this one. But anyway, the other reason it's up here is because the final phase can also be a bit tricky on the first go, because there's quite a bit going on with the flames coming out of the heart and also the bone that he shoots out of his nose. But Phantom Express isn't too terrible. And then the last one on the semi-easy, rounding it up, is the Howling Aces. First of the DLC bosses, and pretty unanimously agreed the easiest one. And I am on the same boat. Howling Aces is pretty simplistic. The only reason it's on semi-easy is that final phase. You know exactly what I'm talking about, when it just freaking turns your screen sideways and it just disorientates you. The first time going through, that can trip you up a lot, and it's probably the only part I really died a lot on the fight, on the first go through. But once you get past that, it's a pretty easy fight. Alright, next, we're moving on to the decently hard. Now these bosses are, I'd say, like a good medium in terms of regular. Like, these are the bosses that you'll probably die a handful of times on. You'll probably get stuck either because of one particular part or because some stuff about the whole fight, but that's decently hard for you. So anyway, we have Hildeberg first. Hildeberg is here just because there's quite a bit, probably the hardest fight on Isle 1, just because there's a lot. It's the first plane fight of the game, so already that you're probably going to struggle with of this one quite a bit. But the main reason it's up here, for me anyway, is because of the final phase, the moon. It can be pretty unforgiving if you don't know what you're doing, which chances are you don't know, because it's your first time, so you're probably going to die to that phase quite a lot, and then you're going to have to redo the fight, which you're probably going to mess up quite a bit, and by the time you get back to it again, you're going to die some more, and you get it. It's going to be a bit of a mess. So, because of that, I put Hildeberg at decently hard. Next, we have a definitely not controversial pick at all. We have Grim Matchstick on decently hard. I know quite a lot of people still think he's one of the hardest bosses in the game, but having played through it again, and with the hindsight of the DLC bosses that are around now, I don't really think Grim Matchstick is that bad. I think he's pretty, not too crazy. The biggest problem with it definitely is the final phase. Just the fact that you're shooting the fireballs, can split them up, I still don't like it, it's pretty annoying. But in addition to that, the direction the clouds move are kind of towards the boss, so you kind of have to constantly have a balancing act of jumping away from it, which is very annoying on regular. And it's part of the reason why I think, honestly, Grim Matchstick on regular is way harder than he is on expert. Not to say that he's impossible on regular, but I still think, having the final phase be harder is, a little more unforgiving from regular versus having it like the first phase harder on expert. But we'll get to that more when I touch on the expert mode ranking. But for now, aside from the final phase of Grim Matchstick on regular, I don't think he's that bad. The first phase isn't too problematic. Parrying is very scarce on this fight, so that might be hard if you're trying to do A+ on this one, but again, nothing too problematic. Some people complain about the platforms in this. I don't think it's as big of a problem here as it is on Rumor Honeybottoms. I just think coming from the sides is a lot easier to manage, and the RNG is a lot more tolerable here than it is on Rumor Honeybottoms, where you have to constantly keep going up on the screen, and there's also a chance that stuff can hit you above. So I don't think it's that big a deal there. The second phase is also not too bad, in my opinion, but the fireballs definitely are at the luck of RNG with those. Just the fact that sometimes they'll jump up higher than you, sometimes they'll jump up lower than you, and So that can definitely be a problem. But other than that, nothing too bad. It's just really that final phase is what makes it, pretty decently hard. But really, Grim Matchstick compared to everything else, I don't think's that bad. But I also don't think he's too terribly easy. So that's why I put him up here. I think that's a fair ranking for him. And then we have kind of another maybe controversial pick, King Dice at decently hard. Some people think he's pretty difficult. I think just with the charms you have now, with the different avenues you can take in this fight, and the fact that you can choose your route if you, can parry pretty good. And that's the other thing. Kind of depends on how well you can parry. I don't think he's too bad. I think he's still a bit of a challenge for, especially on your first playthrough. But still, I don't think he's as big of an issue as some other bosses on regular. Just the fact that you can choose your route and choose the path, you can make it so much easier if you have the right strategy that works for you. And the final part of it, with King Dice still in the cards, really depends on how well you can parry. If you can parry really well, it might be really easy. If you can't parry that well, it might be problematic. That's really the reason why I put him here. King Dice, I feel like, is the most sort of divisive in terms of how people see him. Some people think he's really easy because they can parry really well and they know the stuff. Some people think he's really hard because they can't parry that well and they have to resort to other measures to beat him. But so that's why I think decently hard is a good place for him here. Next we have the Moonshine Mob, another one from the DLC. Some people think he's pretty easy, like Howling Aces level easy, but I don't really see them as that easy, but I also don't think they're that hard. Main reason why it's not too easy for me is just because getting used to the whole 3 platforms, jumping up and down each of them, and the first phase alone with all the stuff going on, it can be a rude awakening for the first playthrough, which it was for me. I died quite a bit on the, first couple parts, and I was having 1 health going into most of the sections. Second phase is not too bad, but again, it can be a little hard to get used to, the whole gimmick of it, with passing through the various lasers that come out of the phonograph. And the final phase can be a bit confusing, honestly. I didn't know that you could damage... Most people are not going to know that you can damage the bug that's in the Anteater's hat at the first go-through. They also don't know how you can damage it in the first place, because the tongue damages... it does damage and it does attacks, but you also have to hit the tongue in order to, do damage to the boss. So, for those reasons alone, I think Moonshine Mob is decently hard on regular mode. It's just... It can be... It's a lot to take in. But, again, nothing too crazy. Mortimer Freeze, next on decently hard, kind of rounding out this tier. I think Mortimer Freeze, there's quite a bit in it that can be a challenge, but I don't think he's ridiculously hard. I think he's a decent challenge. Perfect way to round out the decent challenge tier list. First phase, nothing too crazy except for the whole part where he summons the, I don't know what you call them, the weird, the little snow people, I don't know, whatever the fuck you want to call them. But they can be a little hard to dodge. Even now, I still kind of struggle with them. They're not as bad as they are on Expert, but the way they fall, they can be difficult. The second phase can be a lot to take in on the first go, on regular mode. I feel like I say that all the time. It's going to be a lot to take in on regular. But that's just kind of how I'm ranking them, so... Anyway, but the second phase on Mortimer Freeze, it can be hectic on the first go, but eventually you'll get used to it and won't be too bad. Final phase, I don't think it's as bad here as it is on Expert. I think it's probably the easiest part of the fight, right up there with the first phase. But still, just jumping from platform to platform on it can trip some people up. So that's why, that's why he's undecently hard. There's just quite a few things in it that can trip some people up. Next, we have hard. Now, hard is where the difficulty, in my opinion, really starts to ramp up. If you're on the hard tier, that's when you're starting to die quite a bit of times, and you're kind of getting frustrated, and there's quite a lot in it that can, just make you want to pull your hair out a small bit. We have Rumor Honeybottom starting the tier list, and while I don't hate her as much as I used to, I really hate her with a passion. Granted, I still don't really like her per se. I don't like playing her that much compared to others. I don't think she's as big of a pain compared to others as she was before. That being said, she's still problematic. I don't like the platform RNG. It can really screw you over at points, and I think it's a lot worse here than it is on Grim Matchstick with the terms of what you have to stand on and when they can appear. And also, just the fact that you can still get hit by things and jump on platforms that are off-screen is a bit BS. I still don't like that aspect of it. And also, the final phase with her in a plane, shooting fists at you and doing the chainsaw move, it can be a bit jarring the first time you're playing it, and it can make you really frustrated. And that whole section just is can be a bit of a pain to get through. So that's why she's as high as she is. Remember, honey bottoms, still a bit of a challenge. Once you're used to it, it's not too bad, but again, regular, I'm judging this based on this is your first time going through the game, and you have to beat it on regular. So for that reason, she's up here. She's in hard tier. She's in the hard tier. Next is Calamaria. Also, kind of without mercy. You're at the luck of RNG with the first part, although not too terribly bad compared to others, I don't think. But, you know, it's still very luck-based. And you're bound to get at least one bad combination of attacks, depending on what she throws at you. The second phase, not too bad, but again, you're kind of at the mercy of, you know, when you get frozen and when the eels shoot their, you know, their electrical stuff at you. But the final phase is still, in my opinion, very very much, it can pose a bit of an issue for you. They're really just at the mercy of luck, based on when you get frozen, if you can get out in time, and, you know, if one of the pillars is in your way, and you just get take a hit because you're frozen, and you can't do anything about it. So, for those reasons, Calamaria, there's a lot to take in, but you know, it's definitely manageable. It's just a difficult challenge. So that's why she's in hard. Next, we have Glumstone the Giant, and I know some people think he's easy. In my opinion, he's pretty hard on the first go. Pretty hard when you're doing it on regular for the first time, because there's a lot to take in, especially compared to most of the bosses in the main game. Not to say they're bad, but they're definitely more simplistic looking compared to these. A lot of the DLC all of them actually, all the DLC bosses have a lot going on that you need to pay attention to. And Glumstone is probably one of the biggest offenders of that, both literally and figuratively. First phase in particular can be a lot. You know, there's quite a bit of shit going on. You know, you got the gnomes coming in from the bottom, you got the bear attack, you have the geese, you have the parryable stuff that they shoots from his mouth with the gnomes making them. There's just a lot. There's a lot. You know, like even on regular. It's not as bad as on expert, but still, you can trip some people up there. The second phase is okay. It's a bit of a step down in difficulty, but still, the gnomes at the bottom can be a bit, you know, of a problem for you on the first go on regular. Especially even the ball that bounces. Sometimes it's hard to predict when it bounces or where it's going to go, so that can also be an issue. Final phase is not too bad on regular, in my opinion, although it can be a bit of a, you know, if you're playing on a regular first time, it's just having to realize that you have to parry the bone that, you know, with the bell after he shoots the bone at it in order to reset the platforms. That can be a bit jarring, and you probably won't realize it the first time, and then you'll probably die and have to do it over and over and over again, because, like, that's just Cuphead in a nutshell. It's trial and error. And I think Glumstone suffers from it the most, just because with the variety he throws at you. So for that reason, Glumstone is at hard. And rounding out the hard tier is the Devil himself. I know a lot of people think the Devil's not that hard, and he's, like, easier than King Dice, and he's pretty simplistic, and they got it on their first try or whatever. In my opinion, the Devil on regular is still kind of a challenge, just especially on your first go, because there's a lot to take in. The first phase is pretty random. It's randomly generated attacks, and all of them come at you fairly quick. So, you know, for the first time you're going through it, it's quite a bit. Once you get past that, the second phase isn't too bad. It's one of the easier ones, probably the easiest in the fight. But then the third phase happens, and the third phase, in my opinion, is like pretty much Chef Saltbaker, except, you know, there's way less going on. It's like a precursor to Chef Saltbaker. It's like, that's the preview for what was to come in that fight. Because there's just a lot going on screen. You have to worry about the bats on the side, you have to worry about the bats that are flying above you, you have to worry about the poker chips falling down, and you have to worry about balancing on 3 different platforms, all while damaging the Devil himself. Which, again, isn't too bad, because, you know, you're constantly shooting at the eyes, but still, it can be a bit of a hassle. And then the final phase, I know there's a lot of ways you can go about it now that makes it a lot easier, like Miss Chalice. Dash parry makes that part so much easier in terms of parrying the tiers and staying on the platform. But, you know, if you don't have those things and, you know, you don't have the right upgrades for that, that can be also problematic, because I still struggle doing that part. It's quite difficult. Now, I know people can do that part very easily, but I am not one of those people. I'm not that good. So for me, for those reasons, and the fact that, you know, on the first go, the Devil can be, you know, it can be a lot to take in. That's why he's on hard. Then we have challenging, the very top tier. These are the bosses that you're going to struggle with a lot on regular. These are the bosses that are going to be very, very, very difficult. And you're probably going to want to give up on these ones, to be completely honest. So about here we have Dr. Call's robot. Now, as much as I personally think Dr. Call gets a bad rap, a lot of people think he's one of the hardest bosses, if not the hardest, in the entire game. I don't really see it that way still. I don't really have much of a problem with him. I still think the first phase is pretty the hardest phase, but even once you get past all that stuff, it's not too bad. The second phase is whatever, and the third phase is pretty whatever, especially on regular. But for newer players, on the first time, this boss is hard. And that's that's the reason why I put him so high up. On the first go, this is going to be a bad fight. This is going to be a rough one to get through. The first phase, especially, like first phase, whether you're doing it, on your first attempt or like all the other times that you're doing it, first phase is still the hardest one in the fight, so that's problematic with all the stuff going around. Second phase is whatever, it's like the breather phase, but it's probably going to get you a few times because the bullets are very, very annoying to deal with. Even as an experienced player, I still don't like dealing with them. And the final phase, even though I don't think it's too hard, it's just a bullet hell with the pillars going around, making it slightly more difficult than it normally would be. On the first go, you're gonna be like, what? And it's just gonna be a lot. So the whole thing in general, the whole fight itself, coupled with the fact that this is probably, if you're playing on regular, this is your first go at it. And, even with the charms, the new charms you can do, like with Heart Ring to make it slightly easier, I still think I could see people struggling with this one a lot still. So that's why Dr. Call is as high as he is on the regular difficulty ranking. Then right above him, have Esther Winchester, which I mistakenly call the boy in my favorite Cuphead bosses. I apologize for my ignorance. You can stop commenting now, the few of you that did care enough to correct me on that. But yeah, Esther Winchester is a girl, and she is very hard. That being said, I really do love playing her. She's a lot of fun, and she's probably, in my opinion, the most fun boss to play against in the game. That doesn't mean she's not hard, because, oh boy, there's a lot with Esther Winchester. The first phase alone is very problematic. There's a lot to take in, more so compared to Dr. Call's robot. You have the snake oil attack, you have the vultures dropping dynamite, you have the horses spitting crap at you, and you have the whole cactus attack, where she just drags it on the bottom or the top half of the screen, and you have to stay on the opposite side. The second phase can also be problematic, but not as much on Expert. On regular, it's pretty alright. It's pretty decently difficult, but on Expert, but we'll get to that when we touch that video. But even so, it's still fairly difficult. And then the third phase, with the sausages going around, it can be pretty fast, and it can be hard to keep up, just because there's a very few moments in Cuphead that are that, high paced, so it might catch you off guard there. Even if you get past that, though, you have the final phase, which it can be a bit a challenge on the first go, especially at this point you'll probably have very low health, and you'll probably die, and then you'll have to figure out, what am I supposed to do there? And then, you have to keep repeating all the hard stuff again in order to get back to it. So for those reasons, Esther Winchester is the second hardest on regular, in my opinion. It's just so... It's a lot. It's just quite a lot. But, still, we have the hardest boss on regular, Chef Saltbaker. And it shouldn't be surprising if you've played him. If you know what I'm talking about, if you know Chef Saltbaker, you played him on regular, you beat the DLC, it should come as no surprise why he's this high, because, oh boy, the first phase alone there is a lot. It is a rude awakening. He does not play nice. With everything going on screen, it's not as nearly as awful as Expert, but it's still quite a lot. I still think if you're going at it the first time, like I did, you'll struggle with this quite a bit. It's just it's a lot to take in, and you're not really going to figure it out completely on the first go. But even if you manage to survive that, the second phase is also a bit problematic. Not as much so as regular, or Expert, obviously, but with all the stuff going around, the salt pepper shakers shooting crap at you, and the thyme leaves that he throws up in the air landing on you, and the fire trying to hit you all the while, it's a mess. It can be a mess. And third phase, most everyone knows it's the easiest one, but then once you get past that, you'll have the final phase, which at that point, you'll probably have 1 or 2 HP left, which, in my opinion, just looking at it from that perspective, I think that's why the developers made the final phase what it is, just a heart bouncing around, you having to jump up on platforms, because they probably knew by that point you're just going to have 1 HP and you're not going to be able to do much, so that's why they made the final phase not too easy, but also not too hard, not hard compared to the first phase, so that whole last part's just an endurance test. But all that combined makes him probably the hardest fight on regular, in my opinion. It's a challenge. It is a challenge. I feel like Saltbaker is like the final fight that a lot of people wish the devil was. It is just, it's a tough one. And on regular especially, you know, going through it the first time, it's gonna be tough. So for that reason, Chef Saltbaker tops up the challenging tier. But with that is going to wrap up this tier list of the regular difficulty and Cuphead bosses. And again, if you disagree with this list, let me know. Let me know what you'd change. Let me know what you'd switch around. But please do it respectfully. You don't have to insult me or my mother just because I didn't rank one of your bosses on harder or easier. There's no need to do that, all right? We can all be civil about this. And, feel free to comment what you thought about this video, or what you changed, or what your thoughts are on this video. Or if you don't care about Cuphead or this tier list and you just want to comment anyway, just feel free to leave one. I'd be happy to see what you have to say. And until next time, stay cool, and bye-bye.